Thank you guys so much for coming on Friday, last day of the week. Who's been to every single event before this? Gold star, congratulations. 2 of you. All right, well, we're gonna try to keep the energy high. I'm gonna just do a quick round of introductions. For those of you who don't know everyone on the panel, maybe let's do 30 seconds. Hard for you have a long career. Let's do this, start with Yat, 30 seconds, just introduce yourself, background of the business.
All right, my name is Yat. I've been in tech in Hong Kong for almost 30 years, ouch. And so our company Outplace is one of the first, I guess, tech companies. Started in '98 here, and we build companies. We have AI accelerators in the group. We do games, and we're just glad to be here, I guess. Yes, thank you.
Danny?
My name is Danny. So the CEO and founder of Prenetics. I've been pretty much an entrepreneur my whole life. Dive into restaurants, hospitality, e-commerce, and now genetic testing. So that's a bit about me.
Thanks. Kat?
So, Catherine Chen, I'm the founder and managing partner of AvantFaire investment management firm. Our firm is particularly concentrating on impact investing, which is not sacrificing the financial returns as well as satisfying a social impact.
Awesome. Really important. I think this is a great kind of framing for today. My name is McLaughlin, one of the co-founders of Brinc. We have 7 accelerators around the world, and we also really care about the impact of our investments, focusing on how we feel, how we move, where we live, and what we eat. You actually see right behind here, we have 8 or 9 of our startups from our food tech and IoT and drones and robotics programs. If you want to check those guys out. So why don't we start with Kat? I think your framing is actually a perfect framing for the whole panel, and talk a little bit about your business in terms of why you believe that you don't have to sacrifice the economic returns to have an impact, and how you kind of see that framing kind of the transition of investing and kind of where we're headed.
Thank you, Faye. I think actually to start with such a hard question.
You just told me backstage. You already answered this.
Yeah. So I guess we should start from an easy point to say that we have seen a lot of social problems happening in the world, and this is why we as startup founders are here to try to solve a single particular problems or a single pain point within our society. And this is exactly how I started up myself as well, as it's just happened to be in the financial market, because in my whole career, I have been working in the finance world. And in particular, impact investing is really a kind of pioneer thinking in terms of we are actually seeing the social problems and then redefining the business models, and then to make it a good with financial return kind of investments. And this is why we think within our field, this is really a rising industry. And within asset management in general, what we do is, just as the other VCs and private equities, we do investments in a very traditional way. But what we have seen is really, as you have just said, a kind of collaboration and minglings between industries. And this is how we are seeing as a current trend to solve the social problems.
I thought it was interesting. Backstage, I had read something, or heard Bill and Melinda Gates talk at one of their talks. I think they do the annual kind of recaps to see how things are going in the world's problems. And they said that people always ask them, well, why can't all the rich people just donate the money and then solve all the problems? And they actually, funny enough as they do, did the math on that. And they have the 99% donation pledge and everything else. And if every rich person essentially gave all their money away, we wouldn't even come close. There's just too many problems that need to be solved, and we have to solve them through building businesses that actually survive, that can generate revenue, and attack problems that really matter. So maybe Yat, and I'll come back to you, Danny, can you talk a little bit about how artificial intelligence as a huge, potentially not overblown, but overhyped in terms of where we are and where we're headed, and how AI is going to help us have seriously positive impact on the world?
Well, thanks, May. I think maybe we'll start off and talk about not just AI, but sort of this problem you highlighted about how do you solve these problems, and it's just all the money in the world isn't going to do it. What you need is people, right? You need smart, sort of enterprising people who want to solve this. And this generation wants to work on problems that have meaning and purpose. And so how do you get the best people working for you is projects that have meaning and purpose. And when they are with you and excited, they give the best energy, because that is the kind of power that money itself cannot buy, right? And that's why I think impact investing doesn't suffer from financial returns, because in the future, the best companies will always deliver impact of one from the other. And this is where AI comes in, because AI allows for that acceleration. Because in the past, solving a problem was difficult. You didn't have the resources to do so. With AI, whether this is genetic testing, for instance, or whether this is solving the difficult educational problems, or whether it's, for instance, trying to understand data to analyze healthcare matters, or even when you sort of try to create a more creative and inclusive society, think about schools. In the school, you have to focus entirely on, in the past, about sort of memorizing your math grades so you can sort of graduate well and go to university and college. And now, because computers, because of AI, many of these things you don't have to worry about from a technology standpoint, and you can focus on creativity, focus on sort of human elements and empathy, and in that sense become a more inclusive society. So AI has been overhyped, in large part because of the fact that everyone's thinking it's going to solve everything. And there is a relationship between the data sets, because so much more data is being collected when it comes to sort of photos and images. And as this data is being collected, the AI becomes smarter. And you can see this, for instance, with things like Siri, Alexa, voice services. And the benefits that come from that means it amateurizes all the tool chains. You no longer have to be an expert in voice recognition. Everyone's an expert in voice recognition. You don't have to know how to be an expert photographer. Everyone is an expert in photography. So the end user himself can now be empowered to solve a problem. And to me, this is where AI is exciting. And I don't believe that there's going to be necessarily one major company that takes over. Rather, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of small companies or medium-sized companies solving amazing problems using applied AI and the data sets out there.
I want to come back to that. Andreessen had put in a great topic out about the API economy, later last year. I'd love to come back to that in a second. But in our business, moving on to what you do, Danny, we have one fundamental internal mantra, which is it's our job to unlock data so we can improve life. And we see that in so many problems that we're passionate about. And our first thesis that we really, really double down on is how we feel. So health, medical, and wellness technologies. So Danny, you've been in the game, was it 4 or 5 years now in Prenetics?
Yeah, 4 years.
4 years, okay. And you started out with what I remembered were the DNA tests, and now you've moved into a much deeper kind of approach, and you're now focusing on mainland China, even more specifically. Can you give us your thoughts from the health perspective, not just AI, but then the impact of the type of work you're doing and why it really matters?
Yeah, thanks, Bei. So from a health perspective, if you think about healthcare in general, it's focused on treatment. Right? If you think about billions of dollars are being spent on drug companies focusing on treatment, but what they should be focusing on is actually prevention. Because we do know a significant majority of chronic diseases and cancers, up to 80 to 90%, can actually be prevented. The problem with that, though, is most people don't change before it's too late. So what we feel is that with the power of genetics, it gives you the opportunity and the power to predict before it happens. So for example, how many people in this room have done a genetic test before? It's actually quite a lot, right? Half of the audience is from my team. So it's probably roughly about maybe 5 people out of 100 people have done a genetic test. But to tell you how advanced we're getting into it, in the next few months, we're going to be able to do whole exome sequencing at roughly the same cost that we do it now. And what that actually means from a consumer perspective is that we'll be able to sequence 26,000 genes via one saliva sample and give you over 500 categories of information, health information, to help you identify if you have risk for disease, cancers, physical traits, etc., for roughly 200 to 300 US. And having that information, you'll be able to store it for the rest of your lifetime. And again, I think the key thing also is genes is not your destiny, but it roughly makes up between 30% of individuals' susceptibility to disease and cancers. So if you have that information in advance, that's where you can start making changes to your diet and lifestyle to be able to prevent or delay the onset of disease and serious illness.
So the theme, of this entire day around impact, I think is really, really, really important. But I'd love to go now a level down, because these are sort of like just a high level, glossing over. Yeah, it's important. For me, though, having spent nearly 10 years in Silicon Valley, I was sort of brainwashed with the startup's going to change the world, and you always hear the kind of BS startup pitch of, I want to change the world, and that's why you should invest in me. However, what you touched on, Yacht, is I think what our sort of thesis at Brinc is that I think it is being democratized. It's not that you can't, you can used to be able to just set up a small business in your local town, you feel good about it, but now the ability for quite literally everyone, and hopefully in 10 years with all the open APIs with AI and machine learning, it could be almost anyone can have seriously deep impact, solving very, very legitimate problems. So maybe we can reverse the order here. Can you talk a little bit about, not just from Xerox's perspective, but what is maybe just the next 12 months, 24 months, like what tools are we going to have as investors and entrepreneurs so we don't have to be the genetic expert, so we don't have to be the advanced machine learning expert. So what can we look forward to using to help invest ourselves in our lives to work on problems that we care about?
So Kai-Fu Lee put it nicely when he said, this is the age of implementation when it comes to AI. It is not anymore about sort of the algorithms and learning about the methods. It's time to start doing stuff with it. We have enough data sets out there. We may not have every data set out there, but we can start solving the problems. Because what we also need to do is start collecting the data set. Because of Moore's law, we basically have faster computational power. We also have less and less cost of storage. So the cost of data is constantly sort of decelerating, while essentially we get more information sources to become smarter and better. So one evolution, for instance, would be, in the past, you would only be able to sort of follow a video for a health exercise to get fit and better. And now with AI, you have all of this data that's out there. You can actually start sort of getting corrected from a personalized AI coach, for instance. But the thing is, the technology is out there, the algorithms are out there, but it needs someone to sort of imagine and create and say, you know what, this is something I want to solve. And the team size that needs to solve that is only 5 people. Because you can use TensorFlow from Google, or you can use Amazon for cloud services. In the API economy is powered very much by AI. Right? I mean, how many companies have grown rapidly because they were able to tap into Facebook's API before they shut that down, right? For instance, in the distribution platforms, how many people were able to sort of become creative game developers because of Unity or because of Cocos? Because these tools sort of amateurize the ability for you to make that kind of impact, whether it is for creative stuff, health impact, and data. And this democratization means that the skill sets, however needed, can no longer be as mechanized as we're used to. So that to me is the challenge. And so this is the disruptive element. It is not that you don't have the data and that you can't. I think the prediction is that there'll be twice as many new jobs created because of tech and AI. However, the problem is who can take advantage of it? How are they trained to be able to take advantage of this sort of disruptive new future? And that's frankly probably the bigger concern.
Danny, so going down the level, we get the test. What are the types of things, and maybe not just with Prenetics, but what are you seeing? And maybe you could give a little China example too, because I know that there's some rumors about everyone will be sequenced, or there's, right or wrong, don't know, but can you tell us a little bit more about, let's say 12, 24 months, where are all of our lives going to be impacted by where this technology is going from a healthcare perspective?
Yeah, I mean, from a healthcare perspective, I was saying that within the next 3 to 5 years, what they estimate right now is just, for example, in the US, there's 3.75% of the population that have had a genetic test. In China, that's 0.03%. So basically by 2020, we expect over 20 million people in China having a genetic test. In the US, that's over 40 million people having a genetic test. What that enables everyone to have their genetic information via their smartphones. And then the next time, for example, you go to the doctor and you need a medication, they'll make sure to prescribe you the medication that fits your genetic profile.
Isn't the national DNA bank in Shenzhen for China?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a few different banks, yeah.
Keep going. I read that in an article. I was like, oh, I didn't know it was right across the border. All the DNA in China is like right there.
Yeah. I mean, so for the China genetic data, it must stay in China as well. So any genetic data that is in the process in China must stay in China. But we're talking about the health impact-wise, I think certainly, as you pointed out, it has to be easy and simple. There has to be solutions afterwards, because a lot of times the consumers, they don't care about the science piece. They just want to know, okay, what do I do with this information? And what we're moving towards is personalization. Personalization of your diet, personalization of your supplements, personalization of basically skincare you can watch, right? Because the whole industry is a one-size-fits-all model. When we look at supplements, it's a recommended daily allowance, but we all absorb medications, supplements, have different metabolisms, what goes through our bodies differently. So, but that's where the industry is headed in terms of going from a one-size-fits-all model to being a highly personalized model that, 4 of us, we get different supplements or different dosages on a daily basis.
So the personalized medicine thing is not new. Everyone's heard of this trend, right? Personalized, okay, cool. I think it was last year or a year and a half ago, I heard that they're now using essentially 3D organs that you would take a couple cells from your liver or wherever it is, and they can grow a 3D print essentially of your liver gut, and then they can test the drugs on your actual liver because it's in a petri dish, and know what's going to work and what's not going to work. Because I think, I don't know if you cited this, but I had read something like drugs are something like 70 to 80% ineffective at scale, and even cancer medications can be 70% plus ineffective. And that's obviously you're essentially throwing all that money down the toilet, actually, right? Like it goes through your body, not effective, into the sewer. Where is this really 5 years out? Are we going to see this in any sort of particular type of disease or application in any shorter period of time? I think we've been hearing precision medicine for a long time. I'm just wondering, can it be faster?
Yeah, so that's one of the challenges with health tech investing, right? It does take a longer time. Previously I was in e-commerce and that was quite fast exit, right? A few years exit, but then I think when you're talking about health, it does take much longer time because you're playing with people's lives, people's health, right? So it does make sense actually to wait 5, 10, 15 years when the science is actually ready to be deployed. So when we talk about personalized medicine, part of the problem also is the willingness of the doctors to change. Right? Because you need a lot of people involved. You need taxpayers, you need governments, the doctors, and a lot of times they don't want to change what they already know. Correct? And even when we're talking about genetics or personalized medicine, when the doctors went to medical school, they didn't actually study genetics. Right? So a lot of times when individuals give them a report, they're just like, what is this? I don't understand this, right? So they don't even talk about it, right? So I think it will be there, but it will take probably another, I would say, 5 to 8 years before it gets to being mainstream.
Maybe I just want to add a point here. When you talk about AI and technology approaches and the speed of compute power, it mass amortizes that knowledge. Right? So one of the big doctor annoyances is when someone comes in and says, well, I read this on Google. What about that? And the annoyed face of the doctor is very clear. It's like, don't talk to me about Google, right? And I think that's where it's going to go. And then where is that sort of collaboration? Doctors are being pushed. So generally, we like it when we look at an investing thesis. If it's a consumer-driven thing, it forces the doctors to change because they won't change, right? They're in the classic innovator's dilemma cycle. They're like, well, I'm making money, I don't care, right? So someone has to push them towards that. And so with technologies that are out there at scale, everyone can be their own sort of analyst, so to speak, and it may be partially rubbish, but it challenges the doctor, and they have to involve with it, which is positive.
Yeah, I'd love to bring it back to you, Pat. Okay.
I actually just want to add a point to both of your saying because I think it's very interesting that we actually focus, a part of our focus in industry is healthcare. So we actually focus on a lot of the things that's been going on with AI and healthcare, which is actually the traditional Chinese medicine industry. Because as you say, the traditional medication industry is every prescription is actually individualized for that person on that point of time. So that actually enables a lot of the AI power for analytics. And this is why a lot of currently the kind of trend is really doctors are seeing more tools to help them to start the analyzation and then starting a patient database. So I just wanted to add in this point because I think it's very interesting as we're in Asia.
Well, I think, Dan, you brought something up that I wanted to touch on. I think both Yacht and Kat could talk about this. So A16Z or Andreessen Horowitz, if you guys haven't checked them out, their YouTube channel has so much amazing content. They give away all this stuff. And one of the talks they just spoke about was pharmaceutical industry. And it was so amazing because, is anyone an angel or a venture capitalist investor here? Raise your hands. Okay, almost none of you. Fair enough. So let me tell you one thing not to do. Don't get into pharmaceuticals. So if you think that angel investing or startup investing is risky, pharmaceuticals is the dumbest thing. You lose always. The stats are miserable, and that's probably gets into the whole IP conversation. But I think, Kat, it'd be very interesting for these problems that take so long to really have impact, and then Yacht on your side having had the years of experience seeing this with AI. What is your thesis at your business and the investors, the GPs that are giving you money, saying, okay, we want to invest in impact. We want to solve problems. Do they know it's going to take 15, 20 years? Do they have a different thought process than the normal GPs that are saying, cool, here's my 7 to 10 year commitment, I'm good? How are you approaching the the kind of duration it takes, or the horizon it takes to work on these important problems?
So I think it really comes down into a few things when we analyze who are our GPs and LPs actually. So for example, if we are talking about a government endowments and things, or an institution like that, they are actually willing to take more than 10 years, 15 years, and 20 years time for different researches and to see a developing country's market to grow. And usually what we do is really, we try to time everything correctly between the GPs and LPs, as well as the other investors, institutional investors, family offices as well, so that everybody has their risk appetite to be satisfied. Because when we are talking about the risk appetite, we are actually talking about, firstly, what return you're expecting, and then secondly, how long would you prefer to get the return and how illiquid it is. And within our firm, we are doing private equity, which is actually highly illiquid. So what we find is really just as a typical investment, it is more than 5 years time to 10 years time. And in fact, for impact investing, a lot of the times we see 10 years plus to 12 years is a typical kind of investment horizon. And as Bei, you have said, a lot of the research is just going on, but then we do have different access strategies to see where we can take the startup to the next step.
So I think the way that we would look at this, and obviously we're not in pharmaceuticals, right? But when you look at the sort of Rogers diffusion of innovation curve, right, this is a very classic thing that everyone looks at in our space. It's about the timing of when is it in that early adopter stage, or it then starts getting into a mass adoption area where the diffusion of essentially social distribution or whatever it is that you're trying to promote will spread, right? Much like the smartphone or internet or and so forth. And the problem with certain technologies, in particular like pharmaceuticals, is it stays at the innovator stage for maybe like 30 years, right? Because the time it takes to actually find the proof case takes so much time. But it has different kind of funding models versus startups, because most of the startups actually engage and try to find themselves in the early adopter stage, and then you see results in just 1 or 2 years, moving very rapidly. And that's kind of what we think where AI is right now, because AI needs data sets. And AI was a bad investment 20 years ago because there was no data. I mean, the data was man-made, handmade almost, right? Now, the phone is your data machine, right? You're sensing stuff, you're taking photos, you're gathering so much data at an accelerated pace that AI can actually start to thrive. And so that's the implementation phase. But people don't always get it right. We definitely got it wrong many times as well in terms of that. And that's kind of part of that sort of method. Can you find the right time to invest at an early adopter phase?
Just to say on that, and we'll finish this topic, are you seeing in any of your investments, or as you're looking in different AI or advanced machine learning investments, are you seeing anything that is making you feel like in the health, in the general medical space, that we're going to speed up those cycles? Because a lot of things I'm seeing is I'm seeing very interesting announcements that seem like, oh, we found this out 2 years ago, and now all of a sudden we've proven it. Like, whoa. Are you seeing anything that's coming across your desk or on your side, Danny, that you kind of feel like that curve is going to shorten, or are we still in these long research development phases?
So for us, definitely with anything that's data collected, so whether this is voice or, for instance, image recognition, that is going through a massive growth curve. Because the data sets, if you think about it, just a few years ago, we might collect 500 billion photos. Now we're collecting 1.2 trillion photos, right? A year, it's going to become 2 to 3 trillion photos. And also the social aspect is we're much more willing to give our photos, right? We're completely comfortable with kind of giving up our privacy, and therefore, as a result, the data sets are coming through, which is a different topic on AI and ethics, but we don't talk about that. So that means take voice, right? I mean, voice recognition has become so powerful that actually you can now have a conversation with a computer, and actually you will never know whether this is a real human or not. It's pretty much past the Turing test at this point already.
Is there anything else that we can do as this community? Because I think we're really coming online. Like, it seems like it's happening, but do you have any proof points or anything you can add to that conversation?
Well, maybe I'll start and we'll just share around, but definitely family offices in Asia are beginning to sort of look at this very differently, and I think it's partially a generational shift. And it has a lot to do with where those companies were when they were before, I think. If you think about the first generation of wealth in Hong Kong, it was about survival, it was about putting sort of food on the table and building a business. And money meant that influence, right? Even back when we started Outplays in like 20, 25 years ago, the main thesis to have a startup back then was to make money, right? Which was, it's ridiculous, but that's what it was. And today, actually very few people say, I'm doing this because I want to be rich, which is anyway the wrong thesis anyway. Everyone's talking about how they can solve a problem. What problem are you solving and how is it meaningful and impactful? And so that narrative is spread throughout the world. And there's many proof points today about how people can have meaning and purpose because they don't have to really worry about things like having food on the table. It's more about sort of where will I be in the future, and what's my legacy, for instance. And so the older generations are also now thinking, they're 70, 80, and they're like, I got billions of dollars, and what's my legacy? Right? Where do I serve? And the children are all studying abroad as well, are coming back and saying, I want to be doing things differently. So I see the trend shifting, but it's not fast enough, I think, because they are struggling with their own innovative dilemma. So it ends up becoming that 5 or 10% of what I might have, I might invest in technology almost as a hedge, as opposed to we want to completely change the world and we want to basically just go sort of.
Is that consistent? They're like 5 or 10% of the wealth in Hong Kong families is a lot of money. Is it really that?
Well, it's already happening. It's just not happening necessarily in tech. So, for instance, how many schools are being built by Hong Kong families? How many foundations are being donated, right? In China or Vietnam or wherever they are, right? It's a large amount. It's just not trickled into this area because I feel that we need to communicate to them that the impact investing in sort of impact investing in technology is where scale is delivered. Right now, schools are super popular because they can feel and see the impact, but schools don't scale so fast. So that's part of the education process, I think. But the money is there.
Right, I mean, going over here in Asia-wise, and maybe more specifically in China, is that we're seeing a lot of big companies and family offices investing in health. Because again, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of capital out there. So individuals and companies are trying to say, what more can they do with their capital? And I think health is something that is important to everyone, especially as the middle class is rising, right? So everyone's taking much more vested interest in their own health. And in reality, I mean, I went from Groupon to doing genetics. Yeah? Part of the reason was that I wanted to do something much more impactful than just selling coupons. Right? I was sick and tired of being called a coupon man, right? So now, I think with health, and there's a lot of people out there that wants to do much more than just making a company, and I think that's quite powerful. We're still in the early stages. I think what we need to get to the next stage is actually seeing exits. Yeah? Because once you see exits, then people get returns, right? So I think we're still, I would say 3, 4, 5 years away from actually seeing some major exits in the health tech space.
I would love to talk about that for a second, because Kat, maybe you can ping off this, because I was just in the Angel University with Jason, and he was saying that his sort of estimate to people that are ultra high net worth or high net worth, saying, look, put 5% in and assume you can lose all of it, because you'll make that back on bonds, real estate, whatever else. Like put just 5% and put that into something that is scalable, that is tech oriented. But when you're saying like seeing exits, I've only been here 5 years, and we're now promoting the unicorns, which 10 years in Silicon Valley, my opinion is fuck unicorns. But I really think about the impact of making money and having durable companies. Like the idea of waiting for an exit to me is this really silly fallacy. Like, yeah, sure, that it disperses money back, but that isn't really the goal, right? And like going back to what you said 20, 25 years ago, is the point was to make a company that can survive and keep surviving, which goes back to your fundamental thesis of using basic economics in companies that are durable and survive to solve problems. Like if you just made money as a company and just continued to help sequence and help people's lives for a generation, that would be better, probably, than if you have a big payday, go IPO or something just to pay off the investors. I mean, this could be part of the journey. But I'm wondering, like, to me, I've heard this for so many years, and I'm just wondering if you're saying with your GPs and LPs and everyone else, like, that it's more about what's the impact actually. So we are having 10,000 people a day are getting this done, or 100 million people in 5 years because of our investments are going to, have X happen or Y happen. I'm wondering if that conversation is happening.
Well, maybe just quickly to add, and then back to you, I think we need to redefine the concept of winning. Because in the past, investors, if you're an investor, you win because you make a return, right? There is no other definition of winning. But when we build a business, our impact is measured differently. And that's why family offices look at it differently, because they're looking at the results as a legacy or as a business. So if we can redefine that, then I think we'll have the impact we might look for.
And to your point wise, right, I think exits are actually really important to actually continue to funnel it back to the community wise, right? Just to share, our JV partner in China is Spirit Genomics. They're about $2 billion USD listed company, went public in 2017, but they took a lot of that capital and exit from that to now they're building a 200-acre genetic park in Fuzhou. It has hospitals, residential communities, a biobank, genetic park. So without that exit opportunity, you can't put that money back. And yeah, certainly I know the founder quite well. It's not about exiting for himself, but because he's a super humble guy, right? But then so certainly you need to have everything together to be able to sustain and put back the money into the company to helping people.
Well, I just want to add a point is actually investors and family offices, they need solid investments opportunities. And this is always has been the fundamentals and the purpose of being a family office. So my point is really, there are less good impact investing products available in the market, and this is why we are, as a management firm, as well as a startup company, we try to close the gap and then provide as more financial products as possible that is actually more suitable for investors' appetite. And I think this is really quite a kind of basic point that is no matter when our time is changing, we always have to satisfy with our clients what is necessary and needed.
Well, thank you. I think this is just the beginning of a much bigger conversation. And I just want to congratulate W Hub, obviously Karen and Karina and the entire team for starting this important conversation, because it's not just about unicorns. It's not just about who has the most money, made the most investments, blah, blah, blah. It is a bigger dialogue. So hopefully you guys can keep this throughout the day. We'd love to chat with you after if you want. We're out of time. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for being on the panel, guys.